Yes, yes. Well, let's just dive in. I would like to just go ahead and introduce, because we have two amazing authors with us tonight. And I'm so happy that Kendra Green, Kendra Green is going to be moderating tonight. When I asked Fowzia who she wanted, she had anyone in mind, she said, oh yes, let's have Kendra Green do it. And Kendra Green is the author and illustrator of The Museum of Whales You Will Never See, which was published by Penguin back in the spring. Her artist books are held in collections as far as as far away as Qatar, but her zines can be found locally here at the White Rock Zine Machine. She has been a Fulbright grantee, the Dallas Museum of Art Writer in Residence, and a Harvard Library Innovation Lab Fellow. And at present, she serves as visiting assistant professor at UT Dallas and is the associate editor at Southwest Review. So we're so happy to have Kendra Green here with us tonight for a great conversation with Fowzia Karimi, who is a writer and an illustrator, and her work explores the correspondence on the page between the written and the visual arts. Her illuminated debut novel, which is why we're all here tonight, Above Us the Milky Way, was released in April 2020. She is the recipient of the Rana Jaffe Foundation Writers Award and has illustrated Vagrants and Uncommon Visitors by Kendra Green as well. So they go way back. They're both here in Texas, and we're so glad that you're here tonight with us for the Big Texas Read. Thank you so much for being here. And Kendra, I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Blake. I feel like it's important to set the stage because the first night I ever met Fowzia was so striking, so totally memorable that if you were only meeting her for the first time, I need you to have a little piece of that to be prepared for what is about to happen to you. We have Kim Alexander with us, who had opened her house for a reading, but not just a reading with images projected against a wall, glowing over Fowzia's head as she read. And I don't quite know how to explain this to you, but for weeks afterwards, and this has never happened to me with a book, but an almost physical, right? A bodily impulse to pick up a book and keep reading the thing she had started to share with me. And there was no book, right? It wasn't done yet. And I've had to wait a little more than 3 years for a thing that you are treated to this very moment. And I hope that you've spent some time with the object. Clearly, the text can stand alone, and you might not know you were lucky enough to have the author's voice reading the audiobook. But you should also know this, right? Don't pick one, pick a few of those options, right? This object, right, that demonstrates what a triple threat she is, right? Not just the text, not just the illuminations, but in the protection, right? In serving those things and how they would get to live together, right? Sorting out basically every element of design to try to communicate that to some would-be editor, would-be publisher. And of course, once they saw how she was thinking, they couldn't imagine changing it. So it is my pleasure to continue a conversation that's been running for about 3.5 years now, in words, in pictures, and tonight here with you. Fowzia, it's always a pleasure. It's really good to see you.
Kendra, thank you so much. As always, so sweet and eloquent. Yeah, you mentioned that reading and the book staying with you, but you very much stayed with me after that night. And it was a few different things. It was you saying that you wanted to adopt me for the essay, which I think I initially was thrown off by and fought. And
well, and on behalf of me and the essay, and this is, I was very forward. I sat down next to Fowzia and Merit Tears that evening, and I sort of leaned in for my moment in the conversation because I needed to tell this person I had never met before, but was totally enchanted by. Maybe the first thing I said to you was, so not to put in labels on things, not to say that you aren't totally right about the thing that you're making. I trust you when you say you're a fiction writer, but we're going to claim you for the essay, right? The way that the mind moves, the way that you're thinking about how memory works, right? Interrogating that, the way that you were revisiting, the way that you were in love with form, you have more kin than you know.
I'm happy to be there and to move across that border with Kendra. She and I are actually working on a project together, and it's so easy with her. Conversation is easy. Just coming together through our curiosity and thinking, like just thoughts kind of start bubbling and then exploding and popping whenever I'm around Kendra. It's just been such an amazing gift that came from that night. Thank you, Kim, for creating that night, for introducing me to such amazing people. Kendra definitely highest among them. But yeah, we've had this.
Sense that a painter introduced us, right? That the
Yes, of course.
secret beating literary heart of Dallas is a painter, literary Dallas.
She's got it all too, and I have a feeling there's a writer in Kim as well. She's still hiding out. I'm gonna bring her into fiction. You can fight with me for the essay, but yeah, thank you, Kendra. The book, yes, it's very much a physical thing as much as anything else, and that's just because I absolutely love books. I love them, their physicality, their shape and form. I've got this big one here, but I'll show you this tiny little one here. Just wait, I have to show you this. This little title page with the red ink and the black, and
look at those margins on that text block.
I know, I know, and the cover too. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but they're just such amazing, wondrous things. And writing this book, the images would rise as I wrote, but the design also was forming over all that time. I knew the stars would be on the cover, and had designed several different covers and then settled on this one. But yeah, it's a strange thing writing a book, especially over such a long period, because it's taking shape in so many different ways. And I think if you have that interest in design and then the illustrations as well, I don't know, they just communicate constantly. They do correspond both in the mind and eventually on the page. And it's a lot of work to kind of wrangle all those different energies and forms and bring them together into this one thing. But I feel like that's what books are. Like we can bring in so many things, whether it's in language, whether it's poetry or essay or memory or complete true fiction. It's there's like room for all of that inside this really magical vehicle that is the book.
Well, and I think, right, that we're sort of talking about the material, the physical, the sort of space of it. But I think that the element of time that you bring up is really relevant. I remember your conversation with Michael Silverblatt on Bookworm, thinking about when it was more normative, when it didn't seem like a long time for it to take a decade to write a book, especially a book. Your book in some ways makes me think about the sort of the icon makers, right? That you have the painter, you have the gilder, and you have the frame maker, and right, you need these three artists to come together, and each element is a special craft. And right, again, right here, you've brought us this lovely gilt thing, all by yourself. Is it worth spending a little bit more time thinking about that this is only a thing that we can get over time, right? That we have a slow food movement. Do we need to talk about a slow writing movement?
I think a slow everything movement, a slow walking movement. I'm especially in the arts, you know, I think we want to produce. We're used to consuming quickly, producing quickly, and just moving from one to another thing. But I think there's so much value in just staying with a single thing for a long time. I mean, it is a form of meditation, right? To just focus on this one thing, shut everything else out when you're working, and just see what comes out of that experience, because it's not something you're taught. You can't learn how to write, really. I really don't think that you can. But I think that the process can teach you. That is the only true teacher, is the process, and perhaps books themselves, through reading them, through touching them, picking them up, smelling them, all those things. They're just, they're such brilliant teachers, but then the process of writing itself, it's the only way to learn what your art is. And I don't know, it's a sort of apprenticeship that you give yourself over to when you write a book. You have to surrender in a way to the act of it, to the daily movement that happens. And once you do, it's pretty amazing how so much of it just kind of rises up and meets you halfway. And I don't know. I mean, I think a lot about the unconscious and how much of the work it does. But I think that there's something inherent in books that there is this thing that we as humans, through our historical evolution, have created, this sort of pathway that guides you from, like the codex, open a page and flip the pages. Like, that is something that has been encoded by us, and then we in turn are encoded by that form from our earliest days. We pick up a book, and here's this thing with big giant letters. I've got those in my book. But and pictures and the things that does to you, on a psychological level, on an emotional level, on a physical level. And once you sit down to write, it seems like all of that comes back. And yeah, you're a student of the art form.
I was talking to the Malaysian-Australian novelist Sridevi Iyer last night, and she was talking about, she's got another one of these projects. Her novel, I think came out a month and a half before yours. And it's another one of these, right, more years than fingers on your hand sort of projects. And she was talking about the book, well, first of all, that we change slowly, right? Human beings change, but slower than you'd think. And that books are one of the ways that we change, right? They're technology of changing humanity. And that means that the books that change us the most cause us to slow down, right? The very act of reading them. And I'm thinking specifically about your book. One of the pleasures of it this spring and summer has people that either already knew they needed the book, or people I had strongly encouraged very doggedly and persuasively that they needed to know this work, would text or call me at various points, and watching how hard it was for anybody to finish this book quickly, right? That they were right, intensely engaged and enraptured, but it was not I couldn't put it down, right? Finished it over the weekend, stayed up all night, and then that was over, right? It was the thing that needed to be sustained and savored. In a lot of ways, it makes me think about devotionals, right? That there's sort of a way to dip in, spend time, and sort of reflect for a while before you encounter the text again and again.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds of books and so many different experiences of going into them. There are those books that you just, you dive in and you're out again at the other end of the pool, because it's just, that's what it does to you. And I think that's as a result of the story and the language, and it's like they're designed for different things. And in writing it, you don't really know, what you're putting into it, but you don't know what you yourself, what people will get out of it when they come to it. And like you, all the responses that I've had from friends and from others, it's that, yeah, that they have to kind of sit with the book almost on a daily basis. Like, it's a ritualistic thing, which
It's a book of hours.
yeah, and those, yeah, that's something that definitely, at least visually, this is inspired by those. But that daily ritual of coming to something and sitting with it. And I have a friend who he's on his third reading of it, and now he's very much doing that. It's 5 minutes a day with the book, which is, it's just so touching and wonderful. And to know that came through, that it went into the process, but that it is also part of the product is just so amazing and wonderful.
Fowzia, could we have you read a little bit? Could we hear in your voice?
Yeah, I picked this. Sorry for the noise with my mic. I picked out this piece actually with you in mind, Kendra. I'm not sure why, but it just said Kendra. It is the letter P.
I opened right to it.
All right. The letter P. Plants. The great chroniclers of human history. They gather our annals diligently with root and leaf, store them in rings, blades, flower, and fruit, and pass them on without review or censure, neatly packaged in seed and pollen. The voiceless, immobile plants see without eyes, listen without ears, speak without tongues, and travel far and wide without feet. The upright tulip, the papery poppy, and the tart, crisp apple, like silent ambassadors of their native land, spread the history of that deep, ancient land across the globe. And who is not transported in their presence? Whosoever reads the chronicles of the planet's flora backward from the present will discover the old places, witness the early events, and glimpse answers to the many questions. The farmer's practicality and good sense, the king's ardent desire for riches and novelties, the investigations of the meddling scientist with his thin blade, the blunders of the explorer on his great ship, and the lover's fondness for expression are all collected in the earth's vegetable libraries. Read the flora, and you will know the history of the roads and the trades, the wars and the famines. Hold the firm, ripe fruit in your fist and sense the voyager's lust, the conqueror's appetite. Gaze long into the center of a flower, and you may come to know the suffering and the ecstasy, and spontaneously recite the poetry of lovers and saints. And all this the photosynthetic historians accomplish without aim or intention. They simply occupy the same space and the same time with the human species. But every so often, the garden rose, having listened much to and lived long with the one who tends it, picks up the ways of its caretaker, and having come to understand her needs, it desires to return the tenderness the little gardener has always shown it. Knowing that history alone will not sate her, the blossom speaks back to its caretaker in her own tongue. Listen, the rose says, I remember your people. Let me tell you a story. And that is the letter P.
My students used to do snapping at the end of beautiful things, right? We borrow from the poets. I love that my students also remind me that sign language just has us covered, right? Applause.
Thank you.
Fowzia, that was so lovely.
Thank you.
And I know, I have advanced knowledge that at some point we'll get to see images.
I can do that anytime.
Sorry, I was just checking. It seemed like there might be some things in the chat. Aren't you all good sourcers of information? I'm impressed. Fowzia, I was talking about how I want to claim you for the essay. I now know poets that want to claim you for poetry. There are a lot of right, formal influence, right? I don't need to want to claim you for a printer and a bookmaker, right? Your love of the crisp black text with the bite of red has already announced that you are firmly one of those. Are there quieter influences that maybe have escaped our notice as readers, or that have just been blended in and we aren't calling attention to?
There's so many. In my background, I have a very varied background, which just comes from being a very curious person and traveling a lot. But certainly biology. I studied biology. I went to school as an art studio student as an undergrad, and didn't learn to draw or paint then. That came later. I did ceramics and photography. So I think the just the love of photographic image, especially old ones, comes from there. And then I went back to school to study biology and sort of took a turn and became a biological illustrator. So the love of a form of like form through paint, especially just earlier today, I was painting. I'm working on a book with a friend and illustrating her short essays, and I did an illustration of a honeybee's antenna. And as I was painting, I was thinking, this paintbrush is made to paint this very particular stroke on this segment of this honeybee's antenna, and it's painting is just, it's such an incredible thing. I paint in watercolor, and maybe it's just that specifically, but there's something about following a form with your eyes, a visual form, something especially from nature, something sitting in front of you. If you can, I didn't have the honeybee, but just images of it, but just following the shape with all of your senses, with your hand and feeling the texture of it as the paint moves across the paper, with your eye, with even with your heart. It's like such a loving devotional act to look at something in nature and then recreate that form as devotedly as you can. So in terms of the images, yes, very much the experience of 7 years of painting biological specimens, everything from sea life to insects, which were my favorite, and plants, and just learning to love the natural world with all senses. I think hopefully that comes through in the writing as well as in the images. And
Well,
then
those could seem like acts of witness, right? That
yeah.
careful attention, that I don't know, that humility, that faith, that knows that to really see a thing is remarkable, right? It's holy, is to honor it in a way that can't be done through any other means.
Oh, it's such a sacred thing. And whether you are a painter, a musician, or a writer, yeah, um, that witnessing of life, of the world around you, whether it's the horror of war or a petal on a flower. I don't know. It's just daily honoring those things, and then I think as a writer, you have the privilege of setting it down on paper too, or trying.
Well, while we're thinking about images, Fozia, let's see some things.
um, I'm gonna share
Be a good
an image from
boy.
the book.
Banete, banete, banete.
Hmm. That is not my screen. I think we have this person back again. Yeah, I'm being blocked from sharing.
Maybe LM Gonzalez isn't legitimate, Blake.
Yeah.
The L is not for legitimate.
Yeah, I think that was the same one that we had issues with before. Well, if I'm unable to share the screen, I can.
I think I might be able to make you the
Okay.
host.
Okay.
Well, oh, hang on, Blake. If you're the host, you can remove a participant. You can remove LM Gonzalez. Just hover your cursor over that rectangle, and you'll have an ellipses appear. Choose that. Are you getting options?
Yes, I think I just removed that person. And then everybody else is muted. So I guess, or I mean, she was like one of the only ones who was not unmuted. So, okay. Gosh. Okay, well, Fozia, how about I make you the host and then
Sure.
you can share your screen.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. So This is just the book, that the cover, obviously. And like I said earlier, excuse me, I had like 4 or 5 different designs, and actually took 3 of those all the way to the end. But as with all things with this book, if I let it sit long enough, I can come back and make the decision to take a different route, or to keep something. This one just made sense. Uh, it is the Milky Way, the Earth, the dark side of the Earth, and the sun coming up on the other side, and the crescent moon down at the bottom. And it made sense also to go with a gilded cover one, because I love those. There are all these late 19th century American book covers that have the gilding that are just so incredible. There's some of the fairy tale ones that will have like a flying witch on a broom, or again, stars. But this sort of, it's inspired a bit by those, but try to take it more in a more modern direction, especially with a font and the blockiness. Hold on one sec. That's the back side of the book. And then here, the end of the prologue and the half title with the letter A for the first piece showing on the other side.
I just love that echo that we see, right? The tapering and then the A.
Yeah. And the tapering also goes with the text right there, the whirl of voices in the family, like an upside down fire. And the table of contents, which I had so many different designs for this, because there's so many pieces. There are 200 something pieces, and there's no way you can lay those out just kind of page after page. It would have taken like 12 or 15 pages just to do the table of contents. But this was actually inspired by a book that I have here called Dead, of course. And it's by Charles Saatchi, of all people, but I can show you that. And the alphabet comes into this, and then of course the red text as well for the page numbers to break it up. The letter C. And these large letters, they're like the letters in illuminated manuscripts, but it's also more directly taken from, I think it's a 1934 edition of Ulysses. And that's just a couple of letters throughout the book. But I just love like the alphabet itself having a say on the page, both the graphic one and just the sound of it. All these letters have so many layers to them just on their own. Just the C, there's so many things that a C can be. And the letter S. So photograph here, one that as a child I went back to all the time, just missing the poppies that I remember from my childhood. That's my mother and my older sister. And a painting of an astronaut, Kepler, astronomer / astronaut. For some reason it keeps stopping. So
It wants to be a slow viewer.
yeah, it does. And here are footprints stepping over the actual text. A few of these images are very directly inspired by illuminated manuscripts. The top one is actually a book of hours, and these are groups of nuns. And in the story, it's a group of Afghani women mourning. They've been to yet another funeral, and these funerals were just so ubiquitous. When I was growing up, we were living here in the United States, but everybody had family in Afghanistan still, so there were just constant funerals for people who died there, but were mourned here as well. And this is Hellmouth. You can see on the right, very direct pulling from that image. In my book, Hellmouth is the torture chamber, whereas normally it's the opening to hell, but of course, so is the torture chamber.
Well, and that table, right, so stark compared to the suffering in the source images.
Yeah, yeah, I guess to let you use your imagination for what happens in that space. Yeah, I think that's actually the last one.
It's hard to know what to say after Hellmouth.
Yeah.
Uh, I think about like the intensity of this book, right? That as much as I want to talk to you about abecedariums and right the borrowed form and the bestiary, the way that the alphabet gets at, right, becomes a meditation on what is movable, what is combinable, what from a finite place gives us everything else. It would seem strange to ignore the fact that this is a book about war, right, about the long legacies of suffering on right, individuals, on families, on nation states, on much bigger things. Was there
Yeah,
ever a time when you thought of it, I don't know, as something else? Was it always going to be a book about war?
it was always going to be a book about my childhood, which is so much about war as well. I mean, we only lived through the first year of it. We were fortunate enough to be able to escape it, but for so many reasons, it doesn't leave you. I mean, both the memory of it, but we just constantly, like I said earlier, were aware of others dying or excuse me, losing limbs or just sometimes not having any contact at all. In which case, you imagine. I can't say worse because there's just there's always horrors coming out of that place and still are, unfortunately, after 40 years now. But yeah, early on, I think some part of me wanted to not have to face that aspect of it too directly. But as I was writing, I think in year 7, 8, and 9, then all of the pieces that were more directly about the war dead, those were written, and necessarily, I think it happened late. I needed to write everything else first. So the book is not written. The order you see is not the order they were written, and there are pieces that were written early that are at the very end of the book now, and vice versa. But yeah, the pieces about the dead, I couldn't write those until much later.
It's a thing that I'm aware of, right? I think sometimes about actors and the way that they, right, they have to take on, right, those immense emotional burdens in order to portray them for us. And I've never heard anyone really talk about that also being asked of the writer, right, to be in a place to find the words. It strikes me it must be almost exactly the same thing, except without right, without another player, without an audience before you, right, to do it much more alone.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's such a solitary thing to begin with, but to to be out in the world at your job or hanging out with friends and then come back to this. It's a very strange thing, this movement in and out of it as you go over the years. But
Well, and it strikes me that the abecedarium structure is such a comfort, right? That there is something systematic and rigorous and predictable and familiar and comforting to hold all of these pieces of things that aren't sensible, right? That cannot be totally understood.
yeah, and I think the decision to use those formal elements, both the letters of the alphabet and um, the images to break up that kind of telling, it they were very conscious ones, and partly because I knew that I myself couldn't just dive in. And neither did I want to, because I feel like, and the reason I call it fiction is that um, that form allows you to move in and out and to really telescope, and then uh, even hide in ways behind things, not out of fear or not wanting to deal with something, but I feel like there's this play that needs to happen, especially when the subject matter is so difficult, between light and dark, and the macro and the micro, and yes, and the structure of the alphabet allowed that. The choice to make it book of fiction rather than, it's not autobiography in a true sense, and I say that from the very start so that people don't expect that going into it. And I feel like fiction, it allows a story to be told in a truer sense, if that makes sense. I think that we have all of that as tools to use, like this thing that allows you to recreate the world and the story, make it into something else. I mean, all forms do that, whether it's drama or epic or poetry. This inherent structure that they bring to a story allows you to take in that story in a very particular way.
I feel sort of, right, here we are, celestial again. I think a lot about, right, the way that we do not stare at the sun, right, the way that we view an eclipse, right, all of the things that are, right, enormous, right, terrifying, awesome, right, in the old senses, right, these things that are too intense for us to take in, and the ways that we find other ways to see, right, to witness, to document, to share them.
Yeah, I mean, fairy tales do that, right? They're, on the one hand, they're very direct, and on another, that very strict form that they take allows you to say things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And plus, we're just so bombarded with news all the time that I feel like if I were to tell the story in that sort of straightforward journalistic way, it would just be another news story.
Well, and that beautiful twinning, right? That you're finding a way to tell us a story we don't think we already know, but using a form that we do know, right? That also gives us the comfort of, oh, we know how to hear this story.
Yeah, I think it allows for entry points that otherwise might not be there.
I know this about myself. I'm in danger of monopolizing the conversation. I would like to be much more generous than that. And I know that some of you have been able to find the chat. I know that we are a little spread out in our audience compared to the usual Big Texas Read format. But if there are things that need to be said, things that are urgent to discuss, things that are trifling, or a good joke that seems like this is the time to tell it. We have space. Do not suffer from, and I forget its original language, but stairwell syndrome, the realizing as you leave the party that you knew the exact right thing to say.
I've never heard that. You say it's stairwell syndrome?
I believe it's stairwell syndrome, sometimes in a very narrow sense of like having to come back. But yeah, the thing you should have said that you realize when it's too late.
Well, we have a couple questions in our Google Doc. I don't know. I think, does anybody want to ask a question just to start it off? Either
I
in
know
the
those
chat.
of you in the front row.
Yeah, to those of you. Or do you want to unmute yourself? Because apparently that is the setting that we have, which is unfortunate. But maybe Alexandra will start with the Google Doc, and
sure. I had I hope I have the most updated form of that, Blake. Yeah.
I don't know. I sort of hope we get questions from a previous event.
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
No. I'm going to selfishly ask a question I put in the Google Doc. Is that legal?
Yes.
Okay.
You're the only one who's going to know.
Yeah. I just loved I mean, I'm a book nerd and I loved how you talked about it's so great to know other people enjoy the smell of books. Yay. I loved some of the thoughts just in your preface, and I would love you to elaborate on one. Just one line, I could have quoted the whole preface. It was very rich, but you said, the stories in this book are not autobiographical in the true sense. They relate my history as well as ice, coding a telephone line, might relate the conversations that have passed through that line. Do you just want to, I mean, you're kind of beginning to talk about that a little bit about how you were using fiction and everything, but I'd love you to elaborate on that in any way that inspires you, Fowzia.
Yeah, of course. I'm a little skeptical of the form of memoir, especially, but autobiography as well, which is usually a little more upright, I think. Just because I feel like memory functions that way for all of us. We collect little bits, and as they go in, we fictionalize them. We create stories as we witness, we create stories as we remember, we create stories years down the line. With those memories, they change, they shift. And I know this from having a very long memory and watching my own memories change over time, but also I have 4 sisters, and there have been times where I've thought I did something and it was actually a sister, or vice versa. The way that we embellish our lives, it's a fictional act, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's the nature of memory. So I wanted straight away to say this is not that. I would never claim to have like authority over even my own life, because I think memory is a more playful thing than that. And
That's
it
really
just gives you
interesting.
freedom to, it gives you freedom, I think, fiction to just to refocus the lens in different ways as you go through, the writing process. You're not sticking to one thing because that's the truth, because I don't think that exists anyways.
I love that idea of being able to refocus the lens as you write. Yeah, that's really interesting. No, thanks. I really like that. I was gonna ask you, just because I am a poet, have
Yeah.
you read Rainer Maria Rilke?
Oh yeah, there are a handful of poets whom I love, and he is one of them. Yes, I absolutely.
No, I just thought of because he wrote some obviously letters to a young poet and things like
Mhm.
that, but he's got some great prose books in addition, of course, the Dueno elegies and everything. But so
Yeah.
your writing brought him to mind.
Oh wow, thank you.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Blake, do you want to draw from another pre-submitted question? I just want to make sure I'm catching
Well,
all.
I also just want to know if Kim, if you have anything to add, because you were kind of muted at the start, and I feel like Kendra was kind of referencing your kind of how you factor into all of this. Do you have anything that you'd like to add, or?
I had a question, but I can also, Fowzia, I love you so much. Your book has been an essential healing and wounding presence in my life. I'm so thankful for it. And my question, maybe I'll ask my question, and because it's more interesting to me than hearing myself talk about our, I could not wait to read this book. But the first time we met, I was at her home with Merritt. We were visiting, and we went into the studio space where she was making this beautiful jewelry. But I love paintings, and so my attention was turned to, in the studio, these gorgeous paintings by her and by Christian, her husband, who is an amazing painter. And I was asking about that because it just enveloped me. And she very sweetly said, I've been focusing on writing. And then I'm hungry for, I thought I'm saying something so rude, I said, would you read to us? And Fowzia, the look on your face, you said, really? And I said, oh, I would love that. I'll make some tea. And so she went to make us tea and we settled in. And Fowzia, it is wounding and healing at the same time. It's incredibly lyrical. An instant companion that I adore and am devoted to, and I feel loved by it. It's such a loving work. But you started to read the piece about your mother and your voice broke. But I didn't want to stop hearing it. And so I asked, should I keep going? So then you handed it to me and I read. And now to inhabit that, because it's in my home, I'm so thankful for it. But it kind of leads to my question, because it is so loving to me. I felt invited in, but it also helped me see my past in certain ways and the child I was. Can you talk about your sisters and your father and their responses to the book? What has that been like?
Sorry, I'm just thinking for a second, because I'm such a private person. I immediately think like, do they want me sharing anything?
Of course. Yeah.
It's been wonderful. Obviously, I'll share my dad's response to it. He's not a reader. He read the Quran when I was a child. Would pull it out regularly and go into his quiet space and read. So he definitely has, a love for language through a more religious entrance. But I sent him the book and he called and was like, okay, you're going to write this review on Amazon for me. I want you to say this, this, and this. And it was just the most amazing things. But he was just so proud and found it so beautiful and was like, and you designed it, and who does that? And, just all these things I'm not used to hearing my dad say, but he was just obviously very proud and gushing and went on for a very long time. And it was really precious. And if taking 10 years to do this gave me that one moment, I was good. Yeah. And
Well,
Kim, thank you so much for, coming over that first day. Merritt brought you over and listening and then inviting me immediately. Kim was like, all right, we're going to do a reading and we're going to have this many people and you're coming to my house. What date is good for you? She pulled out her calendar immediately. I just met her and she put on this just such a beautiful reading space and invited all these wonderful people. And that's where I met Kendra and many others. Yeah. Thank you, Kim.
I have a question for you. Just talking about the process of writing the book and then designing it and, illustrating and being an artist, being a writer, fictionalizing something that's so close. And, the book as object, right? I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about the book is the artistry. And so in the process of, just the uncertainty of living in the draft for so long and making the art and when did it, when did it become a certainty in your mind that this was going to be the object that we all see? And when did it crystallize that this was, I guess, since I'm not like artistic or visual in any way in that sense, when did it kind of coalesce around your vision for what you wanted the object to be, to say nothing of just what the actual text was and what the story is?
Yeah, I mean, that kept, it was always in my mind that I would do as much of it as I could. I didn't know at the beginning that I would also design it because I didn't know the software and was really intimidated by that aspect. But I just focused on getting the writing down, and then the images and the photographs, of course, were already there. So it was a matter of placement. But at some point, it felt like I'd carried this thing for so long over various terrain, literally and otherwise, and to set it down and let somebody else at the very end take it across the line, it just felt wrong. So I did learn the software and very painstakingly. Like it really felt like I was sewing it, like stitching it piece by piece together in InDesign. And that happened the last year. The 10th year was mainly that. And taking inspiration along the way, kind of thinking I definitely want to do this or I want to do that. But yeah, the actual doing of it was at the very end.
Wow. What a journey. And not every writer gets to take it across the finish line like that. Like you said, I mean, so personal, so intimate, and the vision that you have for it, and you actually got to have that experience of it. Deep Vellum is such a wonderful publisher. And I just marvel at the books that I just finished Mike Soto's collection, and I just love the kind of work that they put out. And so it's amazing that you got to put that across the finish line. It seems almost singular to Deep Vellum as a publisher, and I feel like we're lucky to have them here in Dallas.
Oh, yeah, they're so wonderful, and I don't know that others would have met me there. I mean, it was from the start. I told Will Evans, I need to do this. I'd already actually designed it by the time I met him and he saw it. It was finished, but I, said this, and this has to happen. Like, it was that important to me. I had a very strong vision, and I'd already gotten it to that point. So I would have continued to, if I needed to, but they're so, I mean, they're risk takers, which is such a wonderful thing, something I really appreciate. And he was excited also to have me do it. It worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about just like the risk that sometimes people feel like they're taking just to sit down and write a draft that they may never see out into the world, and just kind of the conviction to stay with a project and to see it through. Because one of my mentors always said, you have to survive the draft.
Yeah.
You just have to survive it. That's it. And it's just amazing to see the completion of the project, and how you stuck with it. I find that truly inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think all writers know that. Just sitting down to do that daily work is difficult, but having the faith that you're gonna take it there, to completion first, and then find the right people to actually put it out into the world. I'm very private, and as Kim knows, my artwork is private. It's sort of a journal out in my space. I share it with friends, but it's not something I would put out into the world. But there's something different about writing to me. It's not, you don't do it for yourself alone. You're ultimately, like, you want to share it. And I always had faith that that was going to happen. I didn't know how I was going to make sure it would get there. But I think if I didn't have that faith throughout, and then the drive as well, I would have stopped a long time ago.
Yeah. Wow. Does anybody else have a question?
A testimonial, maybe?
Well, what's great about the fact that I messed up the controls of the Zoom tonight is that Kendra and Fowzia are going to be in conversation again on October 27th, but this time through PEN America and the Dallas Institute. And before I put that link down here in the chat where you can all go and sign up for another more secure Zoom meeting, Alexandra is going to ask one more question, and I'm going to put that link where we can all go to the PEN event on Tuesday, the 27th, another virtual event. But what do you have, Alexandra?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just barging in with one last question. I spent several years of my life living in Spain, and I managed to get to Rome. And one of the most pivotal experiences was seeing the illuminated manuscripts at the Vatican. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the illuminated manuscript. I mean, you don't have to go into all of it, Fowzia, but just, the connection with your book. Like, I love how there is obviously the images in there to begin with, and then how you're thinking about the alphabet in a physical way. And just a few thoughts on the illuminated manuscript influence of how you put this book together.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved them for the fact that everything was done by hand, every last bit. And, you had a whole group of people working on these, but the hand is there, and every bit of it, you can still see the lines that the text is written on to, you know, that were on the page, and you can see the gold leaf coming outside the line. It's such a human thing, and it feels like a living, breathing thing to me. And I would love someday to actually hold a real one. I've seen lots of them at the Getty and in Europe, and they're usually behind glass, but you want to have like a more intimate view of them. And yeah, there's just something about the fact that you know, blood, sweat, tears, all of that is in these old manuscripts. And the artists that I really admire, that I've always been drawn to, are the same. And William Blake, with his work where he did everything himself, like the painting, the printing, the writing, and yeah, the letterpress, like it was all just him, and his wife would, I think, help him with the washes of watercolor paint. Or Henry Darger, or these people who usually they're hiding out somewhere, because you need a lot of time, a lot of devotion to something like that. But across the span of their lives, they create these monuments to just the practice of making. And like I said earlier, books are incredible because they can take all that and more. And you know, you can have a visual, you can have the graphic, you can have just layers and layers of story. And I can't say enough about how much I love the form, the technology. It's just such an amazing one. So yeah, to me, the illuminated manuscript is sort of the epitome of that.
No, it's beautifully said. No, thanks. I really liked hearing your response. No, thanks.
Thank you.
Fowzia, can I add one thing to that?
Of course.
I don't think I ever quite made the association before, but as we're thinking about our favorite old books in libraries, at Harvard in their special collections, there's sort of a room that you can walk into without having to check in with anyone at all, right? You can just waltz in, and all of these spines, right, that are out to you, and glass cases surrounding the room. And if you have a keen eye, you might notice it yourself. I had to have someone point it out to me that there's a point in bookmaking, right? So we switch over into the printing press, where you need big pieces of vellum, right? And that's hard to come by. It's an expensive process. And one of the ways you get that is by recycling big old books. And of course, there aren't a ton of big old books, but one of the big old book types you can harvest are these I'm not sure I can lean back far enough, but these big old songbooks for religious orders, so that you can have a group of people singing, right, that they can sight read the notes. It has to be big enough that a whole bunch of people singing, right, can see the notes. And so they get cut up, and you'll just, when you know to look for them, either in black or red, you'll see the musical notes just there on the covers. And I sort of feel like your book is like that, right? That it is pulling from these other voices, right? These big old traditions, and quietly, right, singing in a whole bunch of different ways.
I love that image of the giant pieces of vellum, and everyone gathered around it to sing from it, and that making it into these later books. That's incredible.
When, just to add on to that, when my wife was in graduate school at University of Iowa, getting her MFA in painting, there's the Center for the Book there. And so the artistry that just goes into so many of these books is really just thrilling. And the fact that we have a publisher in Dallas that can take your vision, Fowzia, and make one of those objects for mass distribution, you know, whereas so many of the objects that were made at the Center for the Book, I mean, like those are the way you would go and visit, I guess, in a gallery. And so I love that your book is out in the world, and that it can find its audience, and, you know, people can take it either bit by bit or read it in one fell swoop. And, you know, I'm just so thankful that you and Kendra joined us tonight. I know that there were a lot more people who wanted to be here. I'm sorry I messed that up, but I do want to direct everybody to the chat there, where instead of doing two kind of big Texas Read events with the same author this month, the second event is with Penn, with the Dallas Institute and the Dallas Morning News. And so I think it's going to be really great. I think it's going to be another thrilling event. And just to sit and listen to Kendra and Fowzia talk again here in a couple weeks on Tuesday. So make sure you sign up for that. And thank you all for being here. And thank you for coming back after the incident, which I'm going to go drink a ranch water after this to come down. But thank you all. And thank you, Fowzia, for your great work. And
Thank you
Kendra,
so much,
great
Blake.
conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you, Kendra. Wonderful as always.
Couldn't keep me away. Blake, Alexandra, David, thank you for hosting.
Oh my God, I could listen to you guys for hours and hours
Yeah.
and hours. You're really
No, our
incredible.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry about the Nazis.
No, it was a great discussion. Yeah, no, totally our pleasure to
It
have
was.
both of you. Yeah.
It was great.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Well, I'll see you from the seats on the 27th.
All right. See you all then.
right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Fowzia.
Good night.
Bye, Fowzia. Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, Kendra.